We're going to combine lessons 20 and 21 here at the end of Module 2. They really cover the same thing, and they're essentially a review of everything that we've done so far. So we're going to work on adding and subtracting with regrouping in both, and we're going to do that. We're also going to work with estimating, and we are going to do all of that with units of measure attached to our word problems here. So the focus being word problems, but it's going to use everything that we've been working on here in Module 2. So the goal is to do 2 lessons in one because I think we can certainly handle that. And then we'll do a more comprehensive review to cover everything that we've done tomorrow before we do our end of module assessment later in the week. So I'm just going to show you 2 sample problems today. I think that you're going to get plenty of chance to practice some of these on your own, but I want to show you 2 sample problems. Again, there's no new content in this. It's just a review of stuff we've already done. And then I want to talk to you about one additional thing, which I'll do here in a minute after we do one of the problems. All right, so the first one, and some of these will be written out and some of them will have pictures with scales and things like that. But essentially, in some way, you're going to be given information about the weight or volume or length or time, some measure you'll be given, and then you need to problem solve with it. So in this case, I have a banana, an apple, and a peach weigh a total of 726 grams together. So when they're all put on the same scale, that's how much they weigh. If the peach and the apple weigh a combined 948 grams, how much does the banana weigh? First, estimate by rounding, then solve. This last bit here, which I'm putting a box around, that's important because there are 2 steps. Estimate by rounding, then solve. So you're going to round and do your work first, and then you're actually going to figure it out. I've stressed this a lot in our class, and it's something I really need you to pay close attention to because it's something we're still struggling with as a group, and that is that we have to read all the way through the directions. Please, please don't read halfway through the direction and then say, I know what it's supposed to do, and go ahead and just solve it. Because even though if you do it correctly, you're going to miss half of the work. So make sure you read all the way through the directions. It's a very good habit to get into for math and for anything else that you get into. So all that said, I'll get off my soapbox here. What do we need to do? We need to round both of these numbers first. So we have 726 and we have 498. Okay. We could either round to the nearest 100 or the nearest 10. In this case, I'm going to round to the nearest 10. I think that's going to give me a better or a closer estimate. 726, I'm rounding to the nearest 10. So I look at this number. Since I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I look at the ones place, and if that's 5 or above, I round up to the next 10. Meaning if I started at 26 and counted up, the next number that ends in 0, which is 730. Same thing with 498. I'm rounding to the nearest 10, so I look over here at the ones place, and if that is 5 or above, I round up, and it is. So I round up to the nearest 10, which in this case happens to be 500. Again, if I start at 498, I count up the next 10 I get to that ends in 0. Anything that ends in 0 is 500. So now I have my rounding done. And something that happens in class a lot is sometimes you guys will get in a situation like this and you'll just round them and you'll stop. But that's not what it wants you to do. It's not just asking you to round them. It wants you to round them and then find the difference or do the subtraction in this case to get an estimate. So we're saying that altogether these three things weigh 7. I'll put this as part number 1 of the problem over here, by the way. 730 grams altogether. And to find difference, we subtract. We're going to subtract 500. Okay. And by doing this, we'll find out how much the must be the banana weigh. Yes, we know the weight of the apple and the peach together. So this is the total, all. That's the peach and apple. And whatever we find down here is going to be the banana. And the reason this is going to work is that when we take the total and we subtract out the peach and the apple, that's like taking, if you had all 3 things on the scale and they weighed about 730 grams, and you took off the peach and the apple, which weigh about 500 grams, what we're going to be figuring out here is the weight of the banana, and that would be the thing that's left on the scale. So 0 minus 0 is 0. Again, we're measuring in grams. 330 minus 0 is 30, so we put a 3 in the tens place, and 700 minus 500 is 200, so we put a 2 in the hundreds place. And we found out that the banana weighs about 230 grams. So that's step one. We did that part. I'll put a check mark right on it. Part two, we need to actually just do the math and solve it. So we're going to take the original numbers, 726 and 498, and we're still subtracting. We're doing the same exact process, just this time we're not rounding first. Okay, so 6 minus 8. If I have $6, I cannot give somebody 8 of them. So I need to go over here and take from the 20 and redistribute that. So I'll leave 110 here, shown with a 1 in the tens place, and I'll move 110 over to combine it with my 6 ones. So now I have 16 ones over here. I can do 16 ones minus 8 ones, leaves me with 8. Again, we're measuring in grams. Now I have 1 and I need to give 9. So again, that's problematic. If I have $1, I can't give someone 9 of them. So I need to go over to this, or actually I shouldn't say 1. I have $10, I can't give $90. We're working in the tens place here, so it's important to be exact. But I can go over to the hundreds place and I can take, of my 700s, I can leave 6 of them there, and I can move 10 tens over and combine it with my 110 there to give me 11 tens. 11 tens minus 9 tens leaves me with 2 of them, or 20. And then I have 600s minus 400s, which is also 2. So I put 2 in the hundreds place. And I'm left with 228 grams, which is, as you'll see, very close to my estimate of 230 grams. Right? So the banana weighs 228 grams. We had thought it was going to be around 230 grams. Now, in my introduction, I said that there's something new I want to talk to you about. And I guess it's not really new. We have chatted about it, but it's a reminder. And that is that when we do this, we need to think about the reasonableness of our answers. That's a word that you see sometimes in homework and problem sets. That's a word that you hear me say sometimes. The reasonableness means like, how likely is it that my answer is true? Does my answer make sense? And I say that to you all the time. Does your answer make sense? But it's something I want you to get in the habit of thinking to yourself after you do a problem. Does this make sense? So what that looks like is that if you get an answer, if you did this problem and say you got an answer of 1,167, just for example, okay? I need you to ask yourself, does that make sense given what I know? So think back to the problem. I had this banana, this apple, and this peach, and they weighed 726 grams when they were all on a scale together. Well, if they all weighed 726 grams together, is it possible that the banana itself weighed more than 1,000 grams, weighed more than a kilogram? That's not possible. That can't happen, right? Because in order for that to happen, what would have to be true, and we know it's not based on what else we have in the problem, is that the other two things would have to weigh less than 0. Like they're almost like they're a helium balloon lifting the banana up a little bit off the scale, right? So you have to think, when I get an answer, does it make sense? Here's a more common one that I see. Like sometimes we're off by that much. That especially happens if you add rather than subtract. But again, it happens sometimes. I also see something like, um, say we're doing 730 minus 500 over here, like we were doing. And so if you have 730 and you're taking 500, you should be able to know that's around 200. We're going to be around 200. But sometimes I'll see somebody do that and they'll get an answer that, they have 700, I'm taking 500 from it, and they'll get an answer of something like 62, right? Or yeah, well, that was a round number, so 60, right? Well, you should know as third graders when you look at a problem like this that the difference between those two numbers is much more than 60. Because if I took 60 and added it to 500, I'd be at 560, which is still nowhere near 730. So it's not enough to just do the math and then move on to the next problem. We're at the stage as mathematicians in third grade here where we really need to take a look at our answers, understand whether or not they make sense given the problem that we're trying to solve. And if they don't make sense, it's our responsibility then to go back into the problem and figure out where we made an error and correct it. Um, so that's something we've worked on a lot in class, identifying our own errors. And it's especially true here as we start to work on these word problems because we need to make sure that the answers that we're providing make sense. And as a side note to that, it's really important that you show your work on your problems. Uh, it's a good habit to be in. Trust me, I've shared this with you in class as you get older in math. Um, and math gets more complicated, being able to go back and look at your work when you uh, made errors is really important to being able to identify the corrections that you can make. Saves you a lot of time and energy, to be honest, when you do make mistakes. So it's a good habit to be in. Um, but also, from my perspective, or maybe even your parents' perspective, if you do make a mistake, it's very difficult for me to help you understand how to correct it if I can't see your work. So your work is basically showing me your thinking. And in order for me to understand your thinking, I really need to be able to see what you did. So if I just see an answer on a page, I have no idea how you got it. I really none. And if you got it right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I still don't know how you did it. So it's really, really important to me to know how you did your work, and the way you can do that is by showing me, like we did here on the second part of this problem over here. All right. That was sort of the review I wanted to give you about assessing reasonableness of answers. Sorry it took a little bit longer, but it's really an important point. So I really want to make sure that we got to it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the second problem now. That first one was on subtraction, so you probably could have guessed that this one's going to be on addition. Addie looks in her refrigerator and sees a package of juice boxes that have uh, 562 milliliters of juice altogether. She also sees a bottle of water that has 259 milliliters. How much liquid is there altogether? Again, round to estimate first and then solve. That is important. I'm putting a box around it. There are two steps here, two things that need to be done. As you know, Mr. Brunel is huge on following directions. We can always take our time reading directions, and we can always make sure we attempt to follow them. If you don't get an answer correct, that's okay. We can go back and work on it, but you need to at least put yourself in a position to be successful by reading all the way through the directions. So let's go ahead and do this first step first. Uh, round to estimate first. So I know I need to add them because I'm looking at a package of juice boxes and I'm looking at a water bottle, and I want to know all together. So that would be like if I dumped them all into a container, how much would there be altogether? That's adding. I'm going to round to the nearest 10 again. I think that's going to give me a more accurate answer. 562. Let's see, I'm rounding to the nearest 10. That means I look over here at the ones place. If it's 5 or above, I go up. If it's 4 or below, I go down. This one happens to be below. So 562 becomes 560. And I probably should put milliliters back on there. My next one is 259. And again, I'm rounding to the nearest 10, so let me look to the ones place, and if it's 5 or above, I go up. The 9 certainly is above 5, so this becomes 260. Now I need to add these two things together. 560 milliliters plus 260 milliliters. Sorry, my 6 looks like a 0 there. Okay, 0 plus 0, that's 0. 6 plus 6 is 12. Or actually, this more accurately is 60 plus 60 is 120. So my 2 from the 120, the 20 piece goes in the tens place, and my 100 gets moved over into the hundreds column. So notice that's I've had added 100, 2 tens, and no additional ones. Now I have 500 plus 200 is 700, plus one more 100 is 800, and I end up with a total estimate of 820 milliliters. Now, remember, good habits, you should then write a sentence that says, Addie sees about 820 milliliters of juice and water in her refrigerator. Always a good habit to be in to write those sentences. Remember, we use the read, draw, write process. You read the problem. This right here constitutes your drawing, and the writing part is when you write the sentence. So our next step is to solve, and what that means is to do it exactly. So it means that we need to add 562 milliliters and we need to add that to 259. We're going to use a standard algorithm for this. Uh, some of these may ask you on your homework and problem set to use a tape diagram. If you want to, if that's helpful to you, then that's fine. It's certainly not something I'm going to push. I think that you guys are doing a fantastic job with the standard algorithm. And frankly, I think that's more applicable and something you're going to use longer in your life than a tape diagram is. And so I think now that you have a good sort of conceptual understanding of how to do this stuff, I'm okay with it if you skip the tape diagram portion and you um, just do it this way. All right, 2 plus 9 is 11, so I leave a 1 in my ones place, and I put a 1 in my tens place. So 110 and 1 adds up to 11. I now have 60 and 50 and 10. I'm going to add this 10 to this 50 to make 60 and 60, which is 120, just like it was over here. So 20 goes in the, or 2 goes in the tens place to represent 20, and 1 goes in the hundreds place to represent the 100 from the 120. Now I have 100 and 500 is 600, plus 2 more hundreds is 800. So I get a result of 821 milliliters. So my estimate was extremely close in this case. Notice we talked about this a number of lessons ago, that when you round one number up and one number down, often they sort of balance each other out and you get a really close estimate. And that's what happened here. We rounded one of them down and we rounded one of them up, and they sort of balanced out. So again, you'd then write a sentence that says Addie sees exactly 821 milliliters of liquid in her refrigerator. Uh, Again, one more point is that you should then assess whether or not that is a reasonable answer. Does that make sense? Um, and it does in this case. Our answer makes sense. But if you had an answer of like, 14, or if you get an answer of 14,000, neither of those make sense, and you need to figure out where you made a mistake along the way. You also need to make sure that you have units and the correct units. So, for example, make sure that you didn't suddenly change that to liters. 821 liters is an awful lot. That's like 200 and something gallons, um, which wouldn't make sense. Or make sure you didn't accidentally change the unit from milliliters to meters, or um, kilograms or grams or something like that by mistake. So make sure that you have all of the parts of your problem making sense given, or your solution making sense given the problem that you were working on. All right, guys, we are going to continue with review in the next lesson. I guess it's not technically a lesson. We're done with all the lessons here with 20 and 21, and we will do a review here before you go ahead and do your assessment later in the week. The review will cover everything, so we'll go over time, we'll go over liquid measurements, so volume measurements. We'll go over measurements of mass or weight, and we'll go over word problems, rounding, standard algorithm for addition and subtraction. We'll cover all of that in a review packet. We'll do one in class and you'll do one for homework, and then we'll go ahead and move on the rest of the week with the assessment. And before you know it, we'll be in module 3. Great job, guys. You've done an awesome job this module.